Hello friends, it's Juliana Michaels and welcome to my channel. I'm so excited to have you joining me today because I have some very exciting news to share. My next live class, Stretch Your Die Cuts, is now available. This class is going to go live on Saturday, April 12th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's going to be all about die cutting and how you can stretch those dies and get even more out of them. And of course, we're going to be combining them with lots of mixed media techniques. So this class is for anyone that would like to get more out of their die cuts and die cutting machines and combine that with mixed media techniques. It's now available for purchase in my classroom, and you can find links and more details in the description box below. Throughout the class, you'll learn multiple ways to combine your dyes with mixed media, including inks, sprays, paints, embossing powder, and more, to create a variety of unique effects so that you get the most out of your dies and die cutting machine. Each technique is broken down into easy to follow steps, and there are going to be loads of tips and tricks that I'm going to share throughout the class as well. Whether you're new to die cutting or a seasoned pro, there is something for everyone. Along with the background techniques, I'm also going to show you some ways to finish the cards, and some of the techniques are even going to be for creating embellishments for cards. The goal of this class is to boost your confidence in using your dies and die cutting machines for a variety of mixed media techniques, and then so you can feel more comfortable in incorporating them into your paper crafting projects. I hope to see you there. And since I'm on the topic of die cutting, I thought it would be fun to share a card I created using some of the new Timholtz Sizzix March Vault release. Just like the past Vault releases, these are sets that have been reimagined and resized from the retired die sets. For those of us that missed them when they were first released, or who are collectors of all things Timholtz, it's a great opportunity to be able to add them to our collection. Now let's get into it. The supplies I'm going to be working with are the Timholtz Sizzix Vault Floristry and Vault Edges die sets. This is a sidekick side order, so basically what that means is this was designed to be able to be used with the sidekick, which is a small kind of miniature die cutting machine, and it comes with an embossing folder and then this set of dies, but you can use it in any die cutting machine. And then this one includes an alphabet and then these edge dies. The papers I'm going to be working with are some black cardstock, distress watercolor cardstock, or some sort of mixed media paper is what you're going to need there. And then I have kind of a piece of printer paper, so just a kind of a thinner paper. This is going to be used to adhere things to, and I'm just using a thinner paper to kind of decrease some of the bulk. And then some smooth white cardstock, which is going to be my card front, but you could also have, you know, your whatever your card base is, folded in half and ready to go. And I'm also going to be doing some stamping, and this Hodgepodge stamp set is the one that I'm going to be using for this project. However, if you don't have this one, go through your stash and grab some kind of ephemera type stamp sets. So like Field Notes is a good one, Eccentric, Correspondence, Tidbits, any kind of stamp set that has just kind of smaller stamped images will work. And we're going to be doing some collage stamping, but this is kind of collage stamping already done for you. So if you don't have this stamp set, you're going to take your other stamp sets and create your own collage using the same technique. So the mediums I'm going to be working with for this card are just distress inks, and I've got several colors here, as you can see, kind of a rainbow of colors. I've got saltwater taffy, scattered straw, bundled sage, speckled egg, and shaded lilac. And then I'm also going to do a little bit of distressing on the edges with some frayed burlap. You will also need a distress sprayer or some sort of water bottle filled with water, because we're going to be doing some techniques that will need that. And then some of the adhesives I'm going to use on this are the new black foam adhesive from scrapbook.com. And as I mentioned, I'm going to be having some black cardstock. We're going to be using this for the sentiment, and I want to give that a little bit of dimension, so I'm going to use this foam adhesive from scrapbook.com and just apply this to the back side of my cardstock. So like normally when you use white foam behind black cardstock, you can see it. And for me personally, I don't really like how that looks. So I am so happy that they came out with this new black foam. And right now they've got it in the 1 inch and the 1/4 inch rolls. And then they also have it in sheets that are A2 size, and then these 1/8 inch strips. And then it comes in 1 millimeter thickness and then 2 millimeter thickness. So you've got some options there as far as, you know, the sizes and thickness that you want for your projects. So for the first bit of die cutting I'm going to do, I've got my watercolor cardstock and I've cut that into 1.5 by 5.5 inch strips. And then I'm going to take the edge dies, and as you can see, they all have a cutting edge that you can kind of feel that's raised with your finger, and then a smooth edge. So it won't cut this side, but it will cut that design. And then what I did is line up that non-cutting edge with the edge of my paper. And then I took a little piece of some mint tape, and then I just used that to help hold the die in place, and then run this through my die cutting machine. So I'm just going to place that die attached to the paper, just at a little bit of an angle there so that it isn't quite as much stress on the cutting plate. And then I'm just going to run that through my die cutting machine here. Can remove that. And then you've got your strip that we're going to use for the card front. So you can just set that to the side, and then you're going to repeat that same process with all of the other edge dies. And you're going to do 1 sheet for each edge. So there'll be 5 strips of paper once you get all the cutting done. So then once you have all of your little edges die cut, you are ready to move on to the next step. And now we're going to, you can kind of decide what order maybe you want to place your strips in, and they're going to be overlapping each other. And so I kind of planned in my head the order that I wanted them to go in, so I could kind of stay in order and kind of make sure I added the right colors and things to each of the different sections. So this is kind of the order I'm going to go in. And then to start off with, I'm going to take this piece and the saltwater taffy distress ink, and we're going to do some ink smushing. So I'm just going to smush that ink onto my craft mat there. Spritz that with a little water, and you want to get enough water on there till that ink kind of beads up. And then you're just going to smush the paper into the ink. This is always one of my most favorite ways of adding color to my paper. And then you can use your heat tool to dry this. And I kind of like to tilt it and move it around so that I don't end up with a lot of ink dripping on the bottom. If you're getting some of that, you could also have a little paper towel here and tap it off onto that. And then if you want to add a little more interest, you can, repeat that. Just pick up a little bit more ink. Get maybe some of those little dots. If you don't like that, make sure you have a little more water on there if you don't like those little dots. But then just give that another dry, and you can continue that layering process with the ink smushing as much as you like. You just want to kind of dry it in between so that you're building up those layers. Because when the ink is wet, it will just blend, but when it's dry and then you add more ink, it will layer with each other. So then next what you're going to do is you're going to repeat that same process with each of the other pieces. So you'll do this strip with the scattered straw, one with bundled sage, one with speckled egg, and one with shaded lilac, doing that ink smushing technique. Next up, we're going to do the stamping, and what I did was just kind of lay out my papers so that they kind of figure out where they would fit on the stamp so that I don't repeat the same images over and over again, but you certainly could do that. But that just kind of gives me a little bit of an idea about how they would fit. And then I'm working in a stamping platform, which just makes it a little bit easier to kind of keep things where you want them. And I'm going to use some temporary adhesive on the back of my papers to kind of help hold them in position. And now I'm going to take the saltwater taffy distress ink, and I'm just going to apply that to that section of the stamp here. And then I'm just going to stamp that over that section. And there you go. So if you want to stamp that again, like, you know, maybe up here you don't feel like there's enough ink. It's the wonders of the stamping platform. You can kind of re-ink as desired and re-stamp. Get a little more of a better stamped image. And then from there, just going to repeat that process with each section. So I'm going to make sure I clean off my stamp though, so you can use some kind of stamping chamois cleaner, or I like these crafty cleanup cloths. And now we're going to repeat that same thing with the scattered straw. So I'll remove this one from the stamping platform and continue on. Now, obviously, if you don't have this stamp set, what you would be doing is taking your other stamps and just kind of creating your own little collage of stamped images on that strip of paper. Now I'm going to repeat that same process with the green. And then you can do the same with the blue. And then lastly with the purple strip. And then if you are wanting, you know, a more detailed stamped image, you could certainly use the oxide inks or archival inks to get a little more of a detail with this. I was just really wanting something that would just give a little bit of pattern and interest to the background. So the distress ink works just fine for that. And then to finish off the strips, I'm going to take just a blending brush and some of the frayed burlap distress ink, and I'm just going to just lightly ink the edges here. So next up, I'm going to do some die cutting with the little floral dies from the Floristry die set. And again, I'm going to just use some distress watercolor cardstock, and kind of just kept some scraps that work really well for doing this kind of die cutting. And I'm working on white cardstock. You can also cut these from colored cardstock if you wanted. But I find that by doing white cardstock, then I can kind of color them whatever color I want. And then from here, if you want to use something to kind of help hold the dies in place as you run it through your die cutting machine, you certainly can, but it's really up to you. As I mentioned, this die set is perfectly designed to be used with the Sidekick, which is this small die cutting machine here. Yeah. You saw what happened there. I can't get it through the machine. So what you need to do is just make sure that there's like a little slant to the edge of the pad, and you just want to make sure that your paper is far enough back from that that when you place that top plate on there, that the machine's got something to grab a hold of. So now I can go run it through my machine, where before the machine didn't want to grab hold of it because it doesn't like anything too close to the edge here. And so then we have our die cuts there, and I sometimes am quite fine if the die cuts don't pop out, and I'll show you why here in a little bit. So we can set that one to the side. So we've got those die cut. Then we'll just continue on with these other pieces here. And then if your paper does get stuck in the die, you can just use a little craft pick to pop that loose. But then you're going to want to kind of put it back into the spot there. So now we're going to add some color to our die cuts, and again I'm going back with the distress inks. You could also, as I said earlier, use the distress oxide inks or any kind of ink that you like to do blending with. And then I am going to remove the little die cuts and leave just this one here. And then I'm going to take the saltwater taffy ink and a little blending brush here and just apply the ink to the paper. You could also apply the ink pad directly to the paper if you want a much more saturated effect. All right, so now we've got that flower. And we'll pop that loose, move, and then set this to the side to use on our card. The reason I like to keep it in the paper to apply the ink is because when you try to do it, if you've removed it, these little delicate pieces can get really hard to, just to be really careful. So, you know, kind of move away from the center to apply the ink if you've thrown this away. And then I kind of like to tap it on more versus, you know, rubbing it around in circles, which you can kind of do when it's in the paper. So just a little something to keep in mind there. And then we can just kind of move along to each little piece. So like the center here, I'm gonna add some of the frayed burlap. And now here I'm just adding some of that scattered straw. Now we're going to color this one with some of the shaded lilac. And then this technique is really perfect for adding ink to little tiny die cuts like that one that would be kind of hard to hold on to. I'm just going to continue that process with the rest of the die cuts here. And then once you get all of the die cuts colored, then it's just a matter of assembling them using some liquid adhesive or adhesive of choice. So now what I've done is taken the die cuts, and I've also got my dies that I'm going to use for my sentiment, and I kind of arranged them how I want to lay them out on my card. But now is always the tricky part. I figure out how I want to arrange them, and then how do I get them over onto the card and keep the arrangement that I've created. So a little trick I like to use is some press and seal or cling wrap. So then what I do is just cut a piece of cling wrap to the size that I need, and then I can lay that down on top of my cluster that I've created. And then just press down on that to pick up and stick all of the little die cuts to it. Make sure you get them all real good. And then you can carefully pick that up. Sometimes like some of these bottom ones don't want to stick, you can kind of just help them along there a little bit, like your tweezers or your finger. And then all you have to do is flip this over and apply your adhesive to the back of these and then stick them down on your other background. So I'm going to leave this to the side right now and move on to the rest of the card. So for the sentiment, I mentioned using the alphabet dies, and I've got a piece of black cardstock that I applied some of the black foam tape to the back side of it, and this will just add a little bit of dimension without making it too thick and bulky. And then I'm just going to run that through my die cutting machine to spell out the word hello. And I'll run that through one more time to get the second L. You know, if you're worried about those moving around, especially with like working on a small little piece like that, you can also grab a little mint tape to keep that in place and make sure it stays where you want it. And now I have all of my die cuts ready to go. And as you'll notice, it's not necessarily going to cut all the way through the backing, like on the adhesive, but you'll get basically like your own letter stickers created using this foam on the back side there. And then lastly, what we want to do is adhere our strips of die cut paper to that thin piece of printer paper that that I'm using. Now you can use any kind of white paper here. I just, you know, keep in mind maybe like what kind of adhesive you're going to use. Like if you're going to use a liquid adhesive, make sure you've got paper that's going to tolerate whatever adhesive you're working with. And then I am just going to adhere these strips to the paper. So I'm going to start off with the purple one, and I'm going to overlap it just a tiny little bit on the edge there. Just line it up with the top edge there so I can make sure that it's straight. And then I'm going to adhere the pink one here to this edge. And I'm only going to put adhesive along the outer edge here because I'm going to tuck the yellow one underneath it. So I'm going to line that up with the edge of the paper here. And then from there, I'm just going to kind of play around with positioning these other colors so that they're kind of evenly spaced. So I've kind of got even amounts of color sticking out. So I'm going to scoot that yellow one over just a tiny bit more. I want a little bit more of the purple showing. And then once you get those kind of figured out where you want them, you know, I just started applying some adhesive under here. Everything kind of lined up. It's a nice thing about working with a liquid adhesive. And then you can, you know, maybe just set like an acrylic block or something on there to let that dry. And then once that top part is dry, then you can add the adhesive to the remainder of it. And you don't have to worry about anything moving around or sliding around. And then once that's dry, because I'm doing an A2 size card, as you can see, that's just a little bit bigger than my panel. So I'm going to trim this down just a tiny little bit so that I get a little bit of a border all the way around. And then what I'm doing is just trimming this down to 5 3/8 to 4 1/8. So just give me a small little border of white that will show. When I adhere it to my card panel or card base. And then now we can just start adding some adhesive to the back side of our little die cuts. And you just basically want to make sure you get enough adhesive on all the pieces. If you want to pop this up with some foam dots, you could, but I'm just going to let this be more flat on my card. So then got this card already. So then what we can do is just pick up our paper and then carefully play around with getting it centered where you want it on the card, making sure you leave enough room for the sentiment. And then just put your acrylic block down on there, or you can, you know, just press down with your fingers. But leave that in place and let it dry. And then once that's dry, you just kind of gently peel up the plastic. And if you find that a couple of the pieces maybe didn't stick as well and that are like on the top layer, you might just need to add a little bit more adhesive. And then the last thing I'm going to do here is add the sentiment. So, like I said, you kind of just have your own little letter stickers now after applying that foam adhesive. So then you can just pop those on. And I also thought after I did all this, like a little piece of some vellum underneath there would have been kind of pretty to make those flowers pop a little bit more. Wish I had thought of that before I glued everything down, but I think that would be really pretty. Then we have our sentiment, and then I'm going to just add a little more of that frayed burlap along the edge here. Having kind of cut that off earlier. And then now I just need to adhere this to my card front or card base, and the card is finished and ready to go. And yes, I did end up going back and adding the embossed vellum behind the flowers. I used the torn edge die to cut the vellum, and then I embossed it. You want to do the die cutting first, because if you try to emboss and then die cut, when you run it back through the die cutting machine, it will flatten out the embossed design. Here's a look at a second card I created using similar techniques but with different stamps and floral dies. On this one, I did my own collage stamping instead of using the Hodgepodge stamp set, and I stamped the images using distress ink just like I showed in the video. As for the florals, on this one I used the Wildflower dies, and I added color to them using the same technique I shared in the video. Well, I hope you enjoyed seeing how this card came together and getting some more ideas on how you can use your dies. And also, I hope you will join me for my Stretch Your Die Cuts class that is coming April 12th at 12 p.m. You can find all the details and a link to the class in the description box below. And if you have any questions at all about the class, please feel free to reach out to me. I look forward to seeing you there and in future videos. Until next time, stay crafty, my friend. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you can join me on a more regular basis. Hit the like if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to join me on my other social media platforms, you can find the links to those in the description box below. Also, feel free to leave me a comment if you have any questions or if there's something you'd love to share with me and our community. I'll see you in the comments below and in the next video. Until next time, stay crafty, my friend.